I want to be liked. I want people to like me. I want not just clients and colleagues to like me. I want the folks who report to me to like me. Maybe you're a lot like me in that respect. Well, I remember because of wanting people to like me in my early days as a leader, letting the standards slide. And I still do it sometimes. I will see somebody who reports to me um, where their work doesn't quite meet the standard, and I will let it go. I don't say anything. Um, Maybe that's because I want them to like me. Sometimes it's because I simply don't want them to take offense, or I don't want them to think ill of me, that I'm too picky or I'm a perfectionist. Well, I remember also, and I think it was uh, 25 years ago, maybe now. I remember the first time when I really encountered the challenge of coming up against that there was somebody not meeting the standard, and my great desire to recognize his effort, recognize his strongly good intentions, recognize how much work he had put into falling short of the standard, and in this particular instance, there was something in my ethics that required me to really hold the line. And where this was as the director of a waterfront, and I was training a new crop of lifeguards, folks who were not yet lifeguards and who wanted to be lifeguards, who had been training to be lifeguards, whom I had been training to be lifeguards, and one of them just straight up was not a strong enough swimmer. And one of the great bits of value in setting a clear and measurable standard is that you either meet the standard or you don't. And in this particular case, I don't remember what the swimming length requirement was. The swimmer, the lifeguard training candidate, was required by the standard to swim this length strongly, making significant and consistent effort through the water, strong enough that you could see some sort of a wake. This was the standard that between the training program as it was laid out to me, the curriculum, and my own standard, I think I added that definition of strongly, meaning making consistent forward progress through the water at a great enough speed that you could see some measure of a wake coming off of them. Well, this young man, and I call him a young man now, but at the time I think he was 10 years older than I was. He was not a strong enough swimmer. And in fact, there were moments in the, let's call it a quarter-mile swim, when he not only wasn't making strong progress through the water, he was hardly making progress through the water at all. And he did complete the quarter mile. He completed the quarter mile not strongly at all. And he was, in turns, disappointed, pleading, furious. He just could not see that he had not met the standard. He could not see that there was strong reasons for not making an exception to the standard. And he really, I mean, he plucked at my heartstrings. I kind of loved the guy. He was such a dear man in so many ways, and had been so earnest in his effort that I wanted to reward him with the lifeguard certificate. And yet, I knew that whether it was in our organization on the lakefront that I was responsible for supervising, or sometime later in his career, other people's lives were in his hands. And I just could not bring myself ethically to overlook the fact that he had not He had not met the standard that the Red Cross and I, in some kind of combination, had laid out, and it was an objective standard. Um, and so I think, in some ways, for the first time as a leader, I made that distinction very clear for myself, and the determination, the conviction that I would not bend that standard. Um, this is the first time that I can recall just not bending the standard to meet somebody's performance, instead of requiring that somebody's performance would rise to the level of standard. And I wish I could tell you that he came back later and repeated the test and met the standard. He moved on. Which was just fine. What I find in so many organizations, when we are brought in, as we were very recently brought in to a company where people were not giving each other feedback, and where, when on the rare occasion when feedback was given, one rare occasion when somebody would say, you know what, this work right here that I'm looking at doesn't meet the standard, even when those standards were objective, there's a little bit of kind of freaking out. And it's not the first time that I've encountered this in so many organizations. In fact, I was talking to another leader just a few weeks ago about someone who was given some feedback about their behavior that was really, I think by most reasonable standards, really kind of unacceptable behavior in the workplace. He was given feedback about that, and he was so flummoxed that he said he had to leave and take the rest of the day off. He just could not remain. And these kinds of behaviors are indeed difficult to deal with. It is a shame. It is frustrating. And there are some things that we can do to make this easier. One is stop creating an environment where the standard, the actual standard, is something below what the stated standard is, right? Where if we say this is the standard and people turn in work here, and we say to ourselves kind of quietly in the background, okay, that's good enough, I'm not going to say anything, I'm going to accept the work as is. Maybe I myself as the leader will do the tuning up in order to bring it up to the standard. That's not good for us. It creates the actual standard. Let's call it 80%, right? If you set the standard here and you accept work here at 80%, then 80% is the actual standard, even if the stated standard is 100%. So that's so critically important. And one of the things that can really ease your ability to resist less holding people to that standard is to, in advance, as a part of the setting of the relationship, tell people, here's what I'd like to do. If you bring me something that is 99.9% of the standard, what I'm planning to do is I'm planning to give it back to you and ask you to bring it back up that 1/10 of a point so that it meets at least 100% of the standard. If you give me something that's 60% of the standard, I'm going to give it back and ask you to close that 40% gap. If you bring me something that's 80% standard, I'm going to give it back to you. I'm going to ask you to bring it up to that 100% and close that gap. Is that going to work for you? Right? It's going to need to work for you if you want to work here, because these are the standards here. Right? Now, I'm not saying that it is valuable to become a perfectionist. Perfectionism is not valuable for anybody. It is, however, again, I'm going to say, valuable to set a standard and to hold that standard. Sometimes it's hard to set that standard in a way that is entirely clear and measurable. It can be hard to articulate exactly what the standard is. So part of the process of setting the standard is to get the work and say, okay, here are the ways in which this falls short of the standard. And so it is slowly over time and over iterations that people learn what the standard is. You set the standard and require that people meet the standard, and don't pretend that it did. And by the way, silence is pretending that something has met the standard, accepting the work that is substandard. And by substandard, I don't mean that it's below average. I mean, it's below what you've said. This is the minimum qualities that this has to meet in order to meet the standard. I'm saying the word standard an awful lot. And so, well, how is that different from perfectionism? I remember going to a kind of a steakhouse 20 plus years ago where they'd give you peanuts in the shell they were there at the table when you walked in, and so instead of bread you could crack these peanut shells open and munch on them while you waited for your food and while you were looking over the menu, and it was encouraged to just toss the shells on the floor. That is not perfectionism. It was, however, in this steakhouse, it was the standard. The standard is here. What you do is you crack open the peanut shell, you eat the peanuts, and you toss the shell on the floor. I think eventually some folks slipped and fell, and so they had to change the standard because of danger. So the standard isn't about perfection. If the standard for building a Kia is different from the standard for building a Ferrari. And it is not required that Kias meet the same standards that Ferraris are required to meet. So requiring that people meet the standard, once again, not the same as perfectionism. And so articulating these things to the folks who work with us and giving each other permission to say, you have my permission. In fact, I want you to tell me if my work in any way doesn't meet this standard that we have set for one another, the standards that we have set for our work, the standard that I have set and communicated to you for my work. When teams have trust, they can say to each other with kindness and grace, matter-of-factly, the standard is 5. This is 4. Please add 1 so that this is 5. Right? You've not met the standard, and it is not a matter of judgment. It is not personal. It is simply a matter of a measurable result, and you haven't brought this work to that standard yet. Teams that trust each other can do this. And one of the things that I think is surprising to a lot of people is that when you do this in the context of permission, when you do this with kindness and grace, then that actually also helps to build trust. Because when you say, here's the standard, and when you don't require that people meet the standard, that is a mixed message, and there is nothing that degrades trust faster than mixed messages. It may be, and is often considered, nice. It is nice. And so, folks around here call it Northwest nice, although I've heard various different regions ascribe to some form of nice. What it is at the end of the day, it turns into passive aggressiveness. And so don't be nice. Nice destroys trust. Be instead kind. Hold your standards. Make the actual standard match the named standard, and with kindness, with consideration, with grace, with trust, communicate with one another when you've met the standard, when you've exceeded the standard, and yes, when you've fallen short. I'm Aaron Schmuckler, CEO and company culture engineer at the S-Works, where we are working hard to help you engineer trust into your team so people and profits rise. Hope this has been valuable to you. See you later.